You're listening to The Mountain Spirit, a podcast of Christian Appalachian Project. Join us as we talk with artists, leaders, and change makers about heritage, hope, culture, and transformation as we celebrate the voices and traditions that shape Appalachia and inspire us all. Today, our guest is William Isom II, a sixth-generation Appalachian, a filmmaker, researcher, and the founder and director of Black in Appalachia. Based in Whitesburg, Tennessee, William leads a team that produces documentary films, oral histories, research, and data to raise the visibility of Black communities across the Appalachian region. Black in Appalachia was founded in 2012 and works in 13 states, which includes 420 counties. But they focus on Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, and East Tennessee. William, I'm so excited. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Thanks for having me, Tina.
Well, we're excited to learn more about what you all do and also a little bit about your own history. So why don't you first just tell me a little bit about your history, since we started your introduction saying you're a sixth generation Appalachian. So can you tell me a little bit about your family?
Yeah. My family has been here for, a little over 200 years, maybe 260 years, maybe. Both free and enslaved. We were some of the original Isom, the first Isom that I know of was my great-great-granddad, and he was enslaved in Gate City, Virginia, so over in Scott County, Virginia. And then the rest of my folks were mostly free and enslaved here in East Tennessee, so just right across the border from Scott County, here in Hawkins County, Tennessee, and Hamblin County. And we've been here, there was a generation that kind of edged a little bit close to the eastern edges of Knoxville, but we've mostly stuck around this area here in the Holston River Valley, Holston and Nolichucky River Valleys for the past 200 something years. And so that's my family, and we've been here for a very long time, and that's where I'm at today. That's where I'm talking to you from today, is in Whitesburg, Tennessee.
So tell me, were you always a kid that was interested in your family history or in the history of the area? Or was that something that developed later?
Yeah, I was always kind of the nerdy kid that was really interested in the history, and I was nosy, and I was intrigued by our family photos. These people that I didn't know who they were necessarily, but I had this compulsion as a young kid to I couldn't stand like a box of photos to just be unorganized.
Uh-huh.
So I, even as like a middle schooler, I would go get a photo album and put the photos in the photo album and stuff like that. So I don't know, maybe there's some kind of therapy I was needing, but that's what I ended up doing. So I always got really interested in family history, and particularly as I got older, high school. I'm the hip hop generation, right? And so in high school, being nerdy and smart was cool. You wanted to be. So that was the music we was listening to. It was how smart are you? How smart can you? Can you research? What can you find out? And I did a lot of that, and trying to research my family's history, I found that my family's history wasn't in the local historical society. And, I knew my grandparents, but, I didn't know much beyond that.
Yeah. So I just starting in those places, and I've, done some family genealogy too. I'm definitely the person who was interested in knowing, probably not when I was a kid, but as I got a little older, wanting to know that kind of where did you come from. And I think a lot of times you would think, well, there's not much history because of the legacy of slavery. But I think people would be really surprised of going into a platform like Ancestry.com and being able to track down. There's probably more history out there than we think that there is. And sometimes you have other family members that are also looking, and they may have photos or stories, and so making those connections as well. So when did that family history and curiosity about your family lead to you founding Black in Appalachia, and what inspired you to start that project?
Yeah, and You're absolutely right. Though one thing that you just said, most people would be surprised what is out there if you just look. And I think that's the problem with kind of that gap in our history, is that our collective Black history in this region has not been considered important. But once you start looking, it's there. There's no nook and cranny that we've not been in that there's not some kind of Black narrative. And so I just wanted to agree with you on that people would be surprised when they start looking. And that's, researching my own folks. I kind of did that as a hobby, like I would, because I'm not going to pay my bills doing my own family's genealogy. So, I would kind of do that as a hobby on Ancestry and things like that. Well, I'll tell you what, I got really, really good at researching my family's history before the internet existed. And I started to be able to find some things in some different places and repositories and archives. So I got really good at it. But it was something that was just like, I do that for fun, or I do that for my own personal interest. I started working with East Tennessee PBS in Knoxville. And I was an editor. I was editing a cooking show there and some other stuff. So, but my cousin, Stella Gudger, who's in Rogersville, Tennessee, she has the Price Memorial, Price Public School, and Swift Memorial Institute Museum. So she has like a Black museum over there in Rogersville. And she reached out to us at East Tennessee PBS, and she said, "Hey, I got a little bit of funding. We'd like to make a short documentary for 8th graders about Swift Memorial Institute, which used to be HBCU in Rogersville." And so we produced that documentary. It's like a 30-minute documentary called The Swift Story. And it's online. It's on our YouTube. If you type in Swift Story, you can watch it. And the response that we got from that production of that short film, we aired it on East Tennessee PBS, was pretty overwhelming and encouraging, because it was like, oh, people have just been waiting for this story to be told. Like, they knew the story, but for other people to hear the story that they knew, the alumni of the school. And so my boss at the time, Chris Smith, he was like, we should keep doing this. And so the rest is history. I just kept going. And I was like, I'm going to keep going until the wheels fall off or they pull the rug out from under me. So, yeah. And from that, we just continued to build it out, identifying different areas where our labor could help support Black narratives in the region.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about this already. As a 6th generation Appalachian, how has your family history influenced your work and the perspective on sharing this narrative with the larger community?
When we started really doing this work, producing the documentaries, it was, these are stories that I had heard of, and I think everybody will be able to get something from this story. And these are stories that other people in East Tennessee had heard of. But some of these stories we hadn't. Like, for instance, there's the 1919 race riot in Knoxville. I'd heard about that, and I'd heard about the racial expulsions that happened in Corbin, Kentucky, 1919, when they ethnically cleansed the Black population out of Corbin, Kentucky. And they did the same thing in Irwin, Tennessee in 1918. I'd heard some things about this. Oh, that's a sundown town, or we don't go over there. But I didn't know the actual nuts and bolts of the stories. And so once we started researching these narratives, then it's a way to bolster things that people had already heard of, but couldn't put their thumb on the nuts and bolts and the intricacies of those stories. And I think it's the same thing with these family narratives, and these school records that we digitize, because, I can sit here, I could tell you, okay, Jefferson County, these are the Black schools I know, but that's all I know about them. And I might not even know the right name for them. I might just know the name that I was told. So this work is a way to flesh out where the oral history and the official records meet. And that's similarly what I utilize for my own family story, researching my own family. Because my Uncle Gene in Cleveland, Ohio, he would tell me something about XYZ, and then I would go research it, and sure enough, there would be documentation about that one thing that he said. And so it's bridging this space where our oral histories and the official records touch, where they meet at. And I learned that and have familiarity, and it's a comfortable space for me to lean on that validation of our oral histories with the official records. Yeah. Sometimes they contradict those. Sometimes the oral histories, when you start looking, it's like, oh, well, they didn't tell the truth about that one.
It takes I think you have to be open to where the story leads and where the records leads as well. And sometimes, a story you've heard in your family, you find maybe some of the details during the oral history, but it's still fascinating to see that intersection. So how did you go from the documentary then to having a podcast?
The podcast came about, the work was progressing with Black in Appalachia, and then the Public Radio Exchange came out with a grant for podcast training. And my boss, Chris Smith at East Tennessee PBS, said, hey, we should apply for this podcast. And I was like, I don't want to do a podcast. It's a lot of work. As you know, it's a lot of work. And I had enough to do. So we applied. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll apply. And if we get, and then I'll try to find somebody that's interested in doing the podcast. And so we got the money, we got the approved for the training. And I'd reached out to Dr. Nkechi Alameen, who's a sociologist at the time at the University of Tennessee. And her work was around Black Knoxville, urban renewal, things like that. But she also had a firm understanding about like urban Appalachia and the place of Black folks in this region. And she's brilliant as well. And so, and is very engaging. Like she has this engaging personality. And I was like, man. So I asked her if she'd be interested, and she was like, yes, I'd love to do that. So then we brought in Angela Dennis, who's a journalist in Knoxville, as a co-host. And really, Chris Smith and Dr. Nkechi Alameen really are the ones that developed and curated the podcast in a way that I would have never thought possible. Dr. Alameen would pull from some of the historical research that we have done and hold it up and kind of look at it in a contemporary light through her sociological lens. But because of the podcast, the podcast is the most popular thing we've ever done. And without that, I don't think that us as an organization would be in the position that we are today. The podcast, I think, really was a useful tool, not only for people outside the region, but for educators to be able to utilize in the classroom as well.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Did you know on this Giving Tuesday, families in need in Appalachia are counting on you? Don't miss this opportunity to provide nutritious food, warm clothing, critical home repairs, and Christ's love to people living in unimaginable poverty. Visit christianapp.org to give today to help children, families, and seniors in need.
We talked about the documentary, we talked about the podcast, but Blacks in Appalachia is also an organization. So talk about that structure and sort of the goals and objectives of the organization.
Yeah, so we peeled off from East Tennessee PBS a few years ago. I think maybe around the time of the pandemic, we started, or maybe a little bit before the pandemic, we started building out an organizational structure. I'd say it was probably 2 years before. So maybe 2018, we started building out the organizational infrastructure, because as we continued to do this work, producing the documentaries and doing oral histories, the magnitude of the need was become very apparent. It's like, we need also Miss Manuel's box of stuff in her basement full of funeral programs and family photos and yearbooks and clippings of everybody's business in the community. She's concerned that that's going to get thrown away when she passes away. And so like, okay, how do we preserve these items and also lift them up in a way that they can be considered in league with official records? And so we developed what's called a community history days, where we could digitize people's materials and also continue to conduct those oral histories. And so as we were building that stuff out, it was also like, okay, when we're making these documentaries, we can also take a photographer with us, because a lot of the narratives that we're producing can be viewed as kind of dead black and white history. Like nobody's alive from 1919 anymore. And so how do we illustrate that these communities and families are still alive and thriving today, right? And so then it's like, okay, we need a photographer. We need a digital archivist. How do we even set up a digital archive? We reach out to university departments or repositories, and this person would help us with this, or this person would help us with that. And so we're building it. We didn't know what we was doing. We just knew that the need was there and how to fill it. And so since that time, jumping ahead, where we are today, we've got a team of folks now. And it's not all just volunteers or graduate students, though we still rely on graduate students for some work. And it's an opportunity for them to get hands-on, on-the-ground training with some stuff. But we bought a building out here in Whitesburg, Tennessee, out here where I'm from. And it was really a place where we could come and work during the pandemic or right after the pandemic. It's in between Johnson City and Knoxville, so it's kind of centrally located. It's an hour away from Kentucky, maybe 45 minutes away from Kentucky, 45 minutes away from Virginia, 45 minutes away from North Carolina. So it's a very strategically located place. We have a bookstore, we have a research room. We sell new and used books, Black, Appalachian, and Southern books. And we're currently building a radio station in the back, as if we need something else to do.
You didn't have enough to do, Bill.
Yeah.
I can see right now. You just needed more to do. So,
Yeah.
So in your work, so in all the different things you've done, we've talked about documentaries, oral history, collecting data, digitizing archives, researching your own family history. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about Black communities in Appalachia have you encountered in all these different facets of your research in the community?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions of Black people in Appalachia is, in the same way, like, Black people in America aren't a monolith. I think when we talk about Black people in Appalachia, you have to realize that this is a huge area. This is a vast area. But if you're looking at, I think the misconception is not only there aren't or weren't Black folks in Appalachia. I think that's one big misconception, and that somehow Black Appalachian families and communities are a monolith as well. You've got, Black folks in Western North Carolina that have lived and worked around tourism-based economies, right? You've got here where I'm at, what I call the industrialized River Valley. It's agriculture, it's factories. And then, you go just up the road a little bit, it's the coal fields, or what used to be the coal fields of Eastern Kentucky and Southwest Virginia. That's a whole nother economy, a whole nother kind of culture. And then you get to West Virginia, which people automatically assume West Virginia coal, but there's places in West Virginia that were agriculture. Their economy was around agriculture or logging, or we were in a community recently and their big industry was a shoe factory.
Oh,
so
wow.
So I think the diversity of Black Appalachians is something I think that there's misconceptions around that. If people can get their head around the idea that there are Black folks in Appalachia, I think Also, they're going to have to be able to get their head around the diversity of Black folks and the diversity of narratives in our region. I think I can go on and on about the differences between these communities and their in and out migration patterns and their family histories. But even within that, across state lines, across economies, and across county lines, Black folks are in network with each other in this region, across state lines, across borders, across economies, and have been for a very long time. Churches, denominations would go to this one's homecoming, go to sing at this church, go to this church's event. And the same thing with the schools, during segregation, like these schools would play each other.
Yeah.
And that created networks. And then once people started trying to, like, I got to leave because I got to try to find somebody I'm not kin to get married. And so, that expanded the familial networks of these places. Yeah. Oftentimes when we're doing this work, and more recently, it's funny because our community archivist, Alana, she's working on a particular collection right now with Cocke County, Tennessee, which is near the border of North Carolina. She's like, oh yeah, I'm starting to see the connections between the families.
But you all make those connections. And so when you're collecting these oral histories, what role do they play or have they played in actually putting together the documentaries or other media that you put out for public consumption?
Yeah, for the oral histories, particularly when we're talking about a specific community or a specific celebration or specific aspect of a community, the oral histories are the things that bring it to life. Oftentimes we'll get like a scholar that can tell like kind of the base foundation of the facts as we know it, but then that's fine, but you're going to put everybody to sleep. Like nobody's going to be able to, people can get the history, but nobody's going to be able to relate until you get real human beings telling real human stories in there. And I think that's what the oral histories do. They kind of personalize and bring these narratives and this data and this research to life. I think without the oral histories, like it would be dry and not as robust.
Yeah, I think that there's value as well as seeing people tell their stories in their own words. It's one thing for you to record someone's story, on paper, but to hear someone tell their story and to see their face and their expressions, I think there's value in that.
I agree.
So we talked about the number of states that you all focus on. So Black and Appalachia covers a vast region. What are some of the unique challenges and opportunities in working across so many states and counties?
Travel. One of the most daunting things with this, our work is the distance between places. Even here in East Tennessee, you're always having to drive. And it's never a short drive. It's always an hour or more. And so distance, and I know that this in Kentucky as well. Like you get into the coal fields, southern West Virginia or eastern Kentucky. It's always an hour, at least to get anywhere. And so that's one of the biggest challenges. And we learned probably later than we should have, but to take care of ourselves. Like when we're on the road and we're traveling, to be sure not to eat trash food, drink plenty of water, take naps, unplug, go outside, walk around. We learned that it's like, oh, I feel better since I ate a salad and took a nap after driving 4 hours,
Yeah.
And so it seems like common sense, but that's something that we learned. And the distance, but once we get in community and start working, that provide you get energized by that, because people's excitement to engage around their own narratives that'll get you going and help get you through a long day of scanning stuff or recording oral histories. That's an opportunity. And I think now we have an opportunity to really access and make accessible our narratives and apply labor to ourselves in a way that we've not been able to do for a very long time in this country, I think, or ever in some cases, like to dedicate Black labor to Black folks. Like we've built up everybody else's stuff in this country, but we very rarely get to apply labor to ourselves. And I think that's what we really enjoy doing. And that's where, and I think the people that we engage with, like, they see it too. Yeah.
So tell me, is there a story that has, or a moment that has stayed with you or had lasting impact on you personally since you've been doing this work?
Somebody had, on their family land, had identified what they had always heard was a slave cemetery in Lee County, Virginia. And we went out there and started working around trying to research, like, can we find the records of, like, the landowners, enslaved people. And that was probably one of the hardest, like, research projects that I've ever taken on. Like, there was just nothing. And this is one of the times where, we found the tombstones. We did ground penetrating radar. We did everything we could think to try to identify something. Who could be buried in this slave cemetery? And finally, it was like, well, we don't know. We don't know. We went through the courthouse basement, went through every record that we could think of, and we still don't know. And that's okay. Sometimes there's not a happy ending. But I was looking through every will online, every will from people, potential slaveholders in Lee County, Virginia, going through page by page, looking at this stuff. Because what happens when a slaveholder would die, oftentimes he would list his enslaved people by name as itemized property. And that's the only time or the earliest time that you may get to see an enslaved ancestor listed by name is in a will when they're doing an inventory. So I was looking through that, and I looked and I saw an Ison, ISON, and Kelson. My great-great-granddad's name was Kelson. We knew that he was from Virginia. We didn't know where. But there he was. I was looking for something else, and I found him. I found his slaveholder and him listed as for $1,200, and his mom and his siblings.
Wow.
And so that was the moment. Like, it was one of the moments where you stop, and I had the computer, and I'm showing the computer to people. I'm like, what does this say? Because I thought I was going crazy. And sure enough, and looking for that slave cemetery in Lee County, I found my great-great-granddad, which, I mean, I've been looking for him for 20 plus years,
Wow.
and there he was. And so that was very impactful.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Your generosity has a direct and positive impact in the lives of people in need in Appalachia every day. It is the unwavering support of faithful friends like you that make this work possible. Many of our supporters are beginning to plan and envision what kind of legacy they want to leave to support the causes that are near and dear to their hearts. CAP is happy to provide a safe and easy experience for people to create a will and support CAP through non-cash gifts. Through our partnership with Free Will, CAP offers our donors the ability to create a will online and alter it at no charge. Our partnership with Free Will also includes their Smart Giving Suite, which allows donors to give through their IRA, donor advised funds, and stock online, in addition to creating a will for free. In recent years, Appalachia has faced unrelenting challenges, including the pandemic, inflation, and back-to-back natural disasters. You can make a life-changing impact and leave a legacy of hope in Appalachia. To learn more about non-cash giving opportunities, please visit christianapp.org/more ways to give.
So how do you use research and data to support the visibility and understanding of Black communities in the Appalachian region?
Yeah, the data, as much as, we've been doing this for 13 years. And I take for granted oftentimes because we say it and say it and say it and say it, that there's still people that don't know that there were Black folks in this region. I'm like, surely by now the word's out. And it's like, no, not necessarily. And so oftentimes, like, we utilize data when we start working with a community. Communities invite us in to start working. We don't just pop up. And so, when we get an invitation from a community, one of the things that I feel is really important is to have an understanding of what the scope of Black life and Black population data was over time. Like, what did the free population look like before emancipation? What did the enslaved population look like? Like, who were the last names of the prominent slaveholders, and what's the numbers in that, and what's the percentage of the population? And then after emancipation, like, what did the Black population look like? And then on through, and like, really, our work with data kind of ends about 1950, around desegregation. The 1950 U.S. Census is the one that gets us closest to what the Black community looked like in a place before desegregation. And so I think, like, that's for me personally, when I'm looking at data for a place, like, it's 1860 and 1870. So it's before emancipation, after emancipation. Black data is utilized to show, first and foremost, that we are and were here, which is unfortunate to have to prove, but you can say, okay, here's the data. We've been here. I think for our young people to be able to see themselves in the landscape is very important as well.
Yeah.
And these narratives help kind of establish, like, the base foundation of, like, yeah, we were here. We've been here.
You mentioned the young people. What advice would you give to young people in Appalachia who want to tell their own stories or get involved in media to capture their own narratives?
Oh, man, my advice for young people, I don't know if I should be giving any advice to young people. If I had any advice, I would just say, you should be proud of where you're from. And whatever it takes, don't let people tell you that you should not be proud of where you're from. And you have deep roots and rich history where you're standing at now.
So of all the different things that you've done, we've talked about documentaries, oral histories, podcasts, collecting. Like, I love this idea of community events where you digitize things that people have collected. What makes you proud when you think of the generations that have gone before you who maybe thought that history was lost, but you all preserving it or rediscovering it?
Yeah, I think that my ancestors talk to me, because there's too many weird coincidences and things that's happened in doing this work that it's been amazing for me. When I see my ancestors listed as property in a document, I think, dang, and you get angry, and and then you get sad, but then it's like, man, like, they survived that. And if they survived that, then whatever I'm going through ain't nothing. And so, and then it becomes like, oh, like, I can be their hope in some way. Like, my labor can be a testament to their survival.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember finding a story like that and talking to my great aunt and feeling like you wish that there was a time machine that you can go back and say, we're going to be all right. Like, yes, this thing happened. That particular story, his wife and daughter were sold off and he never saw them again. And so my dad's side of the family was descended from that daughter, but like that way of wanting to say to them, but we're still here. We're still here, and we're doing things that you probably could only have dreamed of your descendants doing, but we're still here because that they survived it and they had the strength, and because of them, we are still here. And that's true, I think, of the work we do in Appalachia, and you see it not only obviously in Black communities, but I think in Appalachian communities, that of what your ancestors endured. So for young people, no matter your race, like, your ancestors went through, and because they survived, you're still here, and you can, have those opportunities.
Yep, that's exactly right. They know we're doing good out here. We're doing better. We're doing better.
Amen. Amen. But we always end with this question, tied up a little bit. Our mission statement at Christian Appalachian Project. I'm going to give you an hour because we talked about hope already. But our mission statement is building hope, transforming lives, and sharing Christ's love through service in Appalachia. When you think of hope, transformation, love, and service, which one do you think embodies the Appalachian spirit the most?
I'm going to say love. I'm going to say Appalachia personifies love, because if it didn't, we wouldn't make it and we wouldn't be here.
Yeah, I love it. That gives me the warm and fuzzies as we wrap up.
you know, I've never been accused of giving anybody warm and fuzzies.
There you go. William, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. We appreciate you being on the show. Your work is really making a profound difference in how the history and the present of Black communities in Appalachia are understood and celebrated. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Our guest today was William Isom II, a sixth-generation Appalachian filmmaker, researcher, and the founder and director of Black in Appalachia. Thanks for listening to the show today. Catch new episodes every Tuesday and invite your friends to listen too. You all know that you can follow the work of Christian Appalachian Project on all social media platforms and find the show at christianapp.org/podcast or wherever you get your favorite podcast. If you like the show, take a moment to click that follow button and leave us a review so it helps others to find the show as well. We'll see you next time.